Greetings, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to talk about Chapter 6 right now of the Search for a Nonviolent Future. And a case could be made that this is the key chapter of the book because in looking at Constructive Program, we really touch upon the utter practicality of nonviolence. We get away a little bit from the dramas. I can remember myself, embarrassingly, being in the free speech movement and how much we were concerned with newspaper coverage and looking like heroes all over the college world, and how quickly we lost sight of the issue with very serious consequences. So to stress the significance of Constructive Program from so many different angles, I'll start with the fact that in it you own your own responsibility for the problem, and that makes a huge difference in conflict, because conflicts are unsolvable as long as each side is blaming the other. The minute you take up Constructive Program, you're implicitly saying, I also have a buy-in in this problem, I'm part of the cause, and I'm going to take care of my piece before I insist or demand that you take care of your piece. And that makes just a tremendous difference in the way that a conflict dynamic plays out. And I'm sure this is the reason that for Mahatma Gandhi, in the course of time, Constructive Program became his most important and his preferred option. He actually came to believe, as I point out in the chapter, that if you do Constructive Program well enough, you may never need to do Satyagraha. You could resolve the problem and win your opponent over just by Constructive Program. But ironically, it's the last thing that activists and most of us think of. It is a natural reason for that. We think of conflict, everything, sports, and tragically enough, politics is thought of as a competition, and so naturally it's the head-to-head aspect of nonviolence even. That attracts our attention, but once you get into it, you realize that Constructive Program is really, if anything, the heart, the obverse of the coin of nonviolence, of which Satyagraha, protest, and risk-taking and direct action are the reverse. So I tick off 4 factors that are so important in the preeminence of Constructive Program. I want to do that list a little bit differently now. Start with the fact that, after all, Constructive Program is constructive rather than destructive. Hence, it's much more long-lasting. We have so many episodes of resistance, nonviolent or not, which have succeeded in overthrowing some kind of evil, but they have not succeeded in leading to a permanent change. Because you can only be committed to destructiveness and opposition for so long. The only thing that can really hold on to you indefinitely is the urge to build something. Gandhi was very clear on that point. So it's constructive and hence much more long-lasting, and we have, for example, Serbia, or the Shining Path revolution in Peru, which was not at all nonviolent, of course, but very anti-anti, proved that they could kill people left and right, but eventually the people of Peru turned against them because they never demonstrated any ability to create a society. So that's the first thing, that it's constructive. And by the way, this is going to be summed up in pages 170 to 173 in the chapter. The second thing I would emphasize here is that Constructive Program is the ultimate Swadeshi, because you're dealing, first of all, with your own responsibility for the problem. So it's infinitely easier to fix something that's gone wrong with yourself, or that needs improvement in yourself, which is what you have access to, than it is to try to force somebody else, either by coercion or persuasion, to fix your problem for you. So by focusing first and foremost on your own self and your own community, you're showing your moral bona fides, so to speak, and you're dealing with something that's really workable and you can really deal with. I remember a sentence from one of my favorite Greek philosophers, Epictetus, who said, the only thing that you can really control, and therefore the thing that you must control, is the imagery in your own mind. And that's going to lead us to the conclusion of this chapter. So it's constructive, it's Swadeshi, or dealing with the most local resources. It has stealth properties, as I like to call them nowadays. Very often, constructive program is legal, and very often the opposition does not realize its significance. So hence it has strategic value, because you can do constructive program, build up strength, form community without the opposition even realizing what you're doing, and if they do realize it, they may not be able to do anything about it. And finally, of the four, I stress that constructive program is proactive. A lot of resistance movements are reacting to some kind of oppression, which of course is a perfectly valid, important thing to do. But it's weaker than being proactive and fighting something on your own terms and picking your own time. The ideal campaign, as I mentioned in discussing Chapter 5, you would be able to do both constructive and obstructive programs, and you would know when to do which, and you'd have some sense of a leadership, be it hierarchical or other, that would be able to decide, now we're going to go after the salt pans or the army base, but now we've just got to go back to our communities and educate people or whatever. Then I talk about some of the aspects of Gandhi's own constructive program, which took its mature form in the 1930s and was published in a little pamphlet called Constructive Program, Its Meaning and Place. And I focus on heart unity, and I really, to this day, I still think that heart unity is just kind of a magic key, because we have so many problems of unnecessary conflict that arise because we perceive differences. And differences become a source of conflict only when we misunderstand the nature of life. I make a broad statement, which is based on a unity in diversity principle, not in a unity in uniformity principle. Now, the minute you get a hold of this unity and diversity principle, you can acknowledge and respect and appreciate differences of every kind, even differences in authority, differences in wealth. They do not have to become fault lines for conflict, and you could resolve the very, very grievous, vexing problem of racism. If you remember the very beginning of the book, we talked about anti-Asian hate crimes. We could resolve all of that if we just could grasp this deceptively simple idea of Gandhi's, that underneath differences, and indeed because of them, we have unity. So we need diversity on the surface level, just as badly as we need unity on the heart level. So I stress that a lot, and in my search, which is still ongoing here at Meta, for what would be the Charka of the 21st century, what would be the single campaign that everybody could work on, that would be ongoing, not tied to some kind of effervescence of the moment, that would, in short, have all the characteristics of Charka and its great advantages that it gave Gandhi. What would that be today? At the time that I wrote Search for a Nonviolent Future, I thought the broad-scale rebuilding of a culture, to get away from the violent culture, the culture of death that we've been imbued with mainly through the mass media. Just recently, incidentally, I've come to see that in that 5-part list that we generate at the end of the book, 5 things that any individual can do, the getting rid of modern culture, boycotting television, however you do it, is balanced by the item that says learn about nonviolence. Because when you learn about nonviolence deeply, when you learn what it really is, you begin to realize that it replaces our image of the human being, our story of evolution, all of those things which futurists are saying today need very badly to be recreated so that we can move forward into a successful future. And then at the very end of the book, I try once again to present this idea, this time using the model of thermodynamics, to present this idea that nonviolence is a kind of energy. If you happen to look at the webcast of the course that I taught at UC Berkeley, PAX 164, I begin the very opening lecture by contrasting two examples of two places into which, respectively, destructive and constructive energy were introduced. And surprise, surprise, the destructive energy leads to destructive results, and the constructive energy leads to constructive results. So this is a leitmotif that's been going on through the book from the very beginning, but it sort of fits well into this discussion, all-important discussion of constructive program. To remember that nonviolence is not a set of rules, it's not a commandment, it is a form of energy. We usually don't think about that because we don't think of the human mind as being a field of forces, but that's exactly what it is. And so if through nonviolence you want to introduce constructive energy into the field, then it follows that constructive program is the ideal way to do that. Okay, thank you very much.